In the 21st century, there are various subcultures who wear clothes that diverge from the mainstream, such as Lolita fashion, cosplay, and hanfu. On the surface, it may seem like people playing dress up for fun, but is that all there is to it? Clothing is never just clothing. It confers a rich array of meaning, from the taste of the wearer to the region they are from to their socio-economic status. Therefore, when we study clothing, we can gain a glimpse into the beliefs and values of the wearer and the society they live in. In the last video, we painstakingly recreated 2 late Qing dynasty ensembles by hand. By wearing clothing that mimics what people wore in the past, we may be able to gain a deeper understanding of how they lived. Now, we hope to explore the beauty standards and aesthetics of the recent past and how they differ from our own. To do this, we will explore all the components that make up a late Qing Han Chinese female outfit, from the unseen undergarments to the accessories that adorn our hair. The first layer for both men and women would be the dudou. Dudou both kept the torso warm and provided a convenient place to stash personal objects. Next would be a pair of pants called dajinshan. They could be worn on their own underneath a robe or inside the skirt. This kind of dajinshan were unisex too, and they were very wide at the waist. When wearing, the wearer gathers the top and secures it with a cloth belt. If a woman had bound feet, she would usually wear this shiku over her socks, covering the top of the lotus shoes. As only the very bottom of the shiku would be seen under the dajinshan, usually only the bottom is decorated with embroidery or trim. Ladies with bound feet, or the 3-inch golden lilies as they were called, wore a type of shoe called the gongxie, or arched shoe. They had a slight heel and a very arched insole. Like other shoes of the era, they were mostly made from fabric with layered cotton soles and embroidered uppers. As for accessories, they concentrated on the hands and the head. Bangles made from jade and silver and gold were popular, as well as earrings. For the people who could afford it, silver hairpins were immensely popular in the late Qing and early Republican periods. The meile was another common accessory worn wrapped around the temples. It was said to provide warmth to the head, and of course also served as another avenue of ornamentation. The first layer is the dudou, which would often be embroidered by the wearer, with all sorts of auspicious symbols asking for fertility, wealth, and luck on the national exams. For Chinese people, breasts were not considered a particularly erogenous zone. They preferred to focus on the feet. In the early 20th century, as part of the crusade against traditional values, reformers argued for the liberation of bound feet. They also argued for the liberation of bound breasts. This tells us that breast binding was a common practice back then, and the prevailing aesthetic was not particularly voluptuous. On the bottom half, dajinshan, which are joined at the crotch, are usually worn. They can be worn as undergarments, usually under a skirt, but versions made from fancier fabrics can be worn on the outside as well. The waist is usually extremely roomy to account for fluctuation in weight. The wearer overlaps the waist at the front and secures it with a cloth belt. From photos and portraits of the era, we can usually see a slimmer sleeve inside the dajinshan, which are undergarments known as zhongyi. Sadly, we haven't been able to find surviving examples of women's zhongyi, so we have to extrapolate from what they would look like from surviving examples of children's clothing. Children's undergarments usually have a crossover collar like earlier hanfu, but the zhongyi may also button up like the dajinshan. On the bottom half is the mamian skirt. The two pieces of the skirt are fastened together, forming a wrap skirt. The basic form of the mamian skirt can be traced to the Ming Dynasty, where pleated skirts with a flat front and back panel started to be popular. This is an example of Han Chinese women keeping their Han clothes, while also evolving with time, becoming more densely decorated on the mamian than their earlier counterparts. The dajinshan is worn last, like a jacket. It's held in place by frog closures on the neck and along the front jin piece. When it's displayed flat, like in museums, it doesn't look very long. But worn, dajinshan from the 1870s to the 1910s were generally almost knee length. They covered the top of the mamian skirt, which is why many mamian skirts are only heavily embellished along the bottom half. If the wearer has bound feet, they will usually wear short leggings called shiku. These help to cover the bandages used to wrap bound feet, as well as add another layer of decoration, pulling the eye downwards to the feet. Small feet were extremely attractive in this period, and often, in photos and portraits, women are posed with the feet prominently featured. The embroidered shoes are entirely made out of fabric, with the sole being made from layers upon layers of fabric glued together and stitched. This kind of 绣花鞋 is still produced, albeit with rubber soles and machine embroidery. As for the hair, before the trend for Western-style bobbed hair caught on in the 1920s, most Chinese women never cut their hair, because they adhere to the Confucian values of 身体发肤受之父母. In addition, hair was an important signifier of a person's age and status. Once a woman reached 15, she was considered of marriageable age, and her parents would put her hair up in a bun with a hair stick. Only girls could wear the hair down in braids. This coming-of-age ritual is known as 祭礼, literally hairpin ritual, and has been recorded since Confucian times. Practically, wearing the hair up in a bun also helps keep it away from dust and dirt, which was important since women did not wash their hair nearly as often as we do now. Depending on one's wealth, one would decorate their hair with many hair ornaments. The double-ended fa was a popular style of hairpin, often made in silver, and many survive today. They have a practical as well as decorative use, as they can hold up a hairband from the center. A popular early Qing dynasty book written by Li Yu in 1671, called 闲情偶记, describes the makeup process, revealing what makes a woman beautiful. He says, "For the natural beauty of women, the white skin alone is the most difficult rare beauty quality. Eyebrows should be drawn lightly in the shape of a crescent moon, and a little image of a far mountain. She who has eyes which are narrow and long, her temper must be gentle. She who has eyes which look lively and are clearly defined in black and white, she must be intelligent." Lastly are our accessories. Both Han and Manchu women pierced their ears, and earrings were very often worn. Variations on hoops were especially popular. On the wrist were stacks of bangles. Made from jade, silver, or gold, they were a way to signal status. At the same time, the delicate materials around the wrists discouraged vigorous movement, reinforcing the ideal of the well-mannered, genteel woman.
你不觉得这个鞋子就是拍起来让你脚配比较小？
对啊，
就让你脚配很短，你要怎么办到？
只是你的文艺今天身的打扮如何？
我觉得她有点老气，感觉不符合她的年纪，好像变成一个阿嬷一样。
我也觉得有点像阿嬷，
但是单看的话，整件衣服其实我觉得蛮完整、蛮美的，但是穿起来就可能就是
配上这个妆法，看起来年龄有增加了一些。
对。
那文艺觉得子贤穿起来如何？
我觉得穿起来很可爱，我觉得跟那个照片里面很像，跟那种
古人的样子。
对啊，因为他们那时候就居然会流行刘海，然后就是跟他差不多，只是我觉得比他再密一点，那刘海有点少。
好，我再弄多一点。
都已经带了齁。
带啊，
都带了。好，那我们可以去花园给人家喝茶啦，走走走。
走。
The national monument Lin Family Mansion and Garden was built in the 1860s. As the Lin family were extremely wealthy merchants and landowners, they would have imported their clothes from China. Our two ensembles are similar to what they may have worn in the late 19th century.
所以他们当初盖这种亭的时候，他们都会去设计，或者是你看那个墙，会就是后面看不看得到什么东西。他们会希望可以让你世外桃源，
就有一种就是古代穿越的感觉。
对啊，就还有那些假山假水什么的都是，耗费巨资去盖的。
Though there is a lot of fabric in the mamian skirt, because the pleats are secured together, there isn't a lot of ease to the skirt. The wearer has to take small mincing steps, or else the panels easily part and reveal the undergarments. If the wearer had bound feet, their gait would have a more pronounced side-by-side sway that was considered very attractive. The amount of ease in the dajinshan and the bottom half means that the figure of the wearer is almost completely obscured. Respectable women weren't meant to show off their figure. What is easily visible is the face, hands, and feet. The daily lives of women in the gentry merchant class wasn't as restrictive as one may think. In a wealthy household, servants would take care of most of the chores. So what was a lady to do? Well, they were in charge of the family finances, including managing investments, maintaining social networks, and even participating in philanthropy. Wives would read the newspaper to take stock of the current political issues and financial conditions, and plan the investment of the family's money accordingly. Through the newspaper, they would also learn of charitable causes that were worthy of donating to. By the late 19th century, commercialization and industrialization meant that most garments were purchased, not homemade. Upper-class ladies would pay tailors to sew their garments instead of laboring themselves. These upper-class ladies also spent much time corresponding with family and business contacts. They updated their natal family. They read and replied to requests for assistance. They reported their doings to their husbands if he was away. A popular pastime for ladies was mahjong, dominoes, or playing cards. Not dissimilar to their modern forms, all of these pastimes both served as recreation and a way for concubines to gamble. The extensive jewelry that wealthy ladies wore was more than just a signifier of status. They reminded her to be careful and delicate in her movements. The numerous bangles around the wrist would clink together in protest if the movement were too vigorous, if not outright break. Upper-class ladies from gentry and merchant backgrounds were not confined to their homes. Examples abound in periodicals of the time, such as the 点石斋画报. Ladies actually enjoyed freedom to leave their houses. They may gather in tea houses to chat, enjoy public operas, take part in religious festivals, attend poetry readings, or shop on the streets. Being out and about meant that the respectable women were able to observe the fashions of influential courtesans. This helped facilitate the spread of fashions from courtesans to genteel ladies and back again. When we look at women's clothing in the late Qing, at first glance it may seem restrictive. However, when we delve deeper into the layers and meanings of the garments, we may find that many elements add a surprisingly practical function. The elaborate styles of the late Qing also reflect the growing consumer culture and industrialization of the time. Perhaps the gulf between the old-fashioned Qing woman unable to leave the house and the modern liberated qipao-wearing woman in the early 20th century is not that wide after all.